Scientists found what creates a narcissist. Ever wonder why some people walk into a room with the biggest ego, acting like they're the most important person there, yet completely fall apart at even the slightest criticism? It's almost like they have an unshakable sense of superiority and crippling insecurity at the same time. Strange, right? Welcome to the fascinating and often misunderstood world of narcissism. This is where someone can genuinely believe they are the most exceptional person alive, while secretly battling feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. It's a paradox that seems impossible, yet it plays out in real life more often than you might expect. But here's something most people don't realize. Narcissists aren't simply born this way. They don't just wake up one day deciding to act entitled, self-absorbed, or emotionally detached. Instead, narcissism is shaped by a complex set of experiences over time, gradually forming the patterns of thought and behavior that define this personality type. And the way this transformation happens, it's absolutely mind-blowing. The process begins long before adulthood, often taking root in early childhood, molded by relationships, life circumstances, and even certain biological factors. It's not as simple as just having an inflated ego. There's so much more beneath the surface than most people realize. In the next few minutes, I'm going to break down exactly what leads someone to develop narcissistic traits. We'll explore the key influences that shape them and the surprising factors that contribute to their personality. Some of these might challenge what you think you know about narcissism, but by the end, you'll have a much clearer picture of why certain people turn out this way. Trust me, it's not what you think, and what you're about to learn might just change the way you see narcissism forever. What exactly is narcissistic personality disorder? Narcissism is so much more than just someone who takes too many selfies or constantly brags about their accomplishments. It goes far beyond an inflated sense of self-importance or an obsession with external validation. At its core, narcissism is like wearing a mask, a carefully constructed and incredibly convincing one that hides what's really going on underneath. On the surface, you might see someone who radiates confidence, commands attention, and behaves as if they are superior to everyone else in the room. They seem completely sure of themselves, unfazed by doubt, and always in control. But beneath that polished exterior, things are often very different. Underneath the bravado is usually a person who struggles with deep insecurity, an overwhelming fear of inadequacy, and an unstable sense of self-worth that constantly needs reinforcement. Their confidence isn't as solid as it appears. It's fragile, propped up by external validation and the need to maintain an illusion of perfection. But here's something crucial to understand. Nobody just wakes up one day and suddenly becomes a narcissist. It's not a conscious decision, nor is it something that happens overnight. Instead, narcissism develops over time, shaped by a complex mix of different influences, almost like a recipe with multiple ingredients that come together to create a specific outcome. There are several key factors that contribute to this development, including childhood experiences that shape the way they see the world, teaching them what is expected of them and how they must act to receive approval, attention, or love. Family dynamics that fundamentally alter their understanding of love, validation, and self-worth, often reinforcing the idea that acceptance is conditional rather than unconditional. Biological factors that scientists are only beginning to uncover, suggesting that genetics and brain chemistry may also play a role in shaping narcissistic traits. When all of these elements interact, they create the foundation for narcissistic behavior, reinforcing patterns that can last a lifetime. Understanding these influences helps us see that narcissism isn't just about arrogance or self-obsession. It's a deeply rooted survival mechanism built over years of learned behaviors and internal struggles. Here's what we're going to dive into today: the specific childhood experiences that plant the first seeds of narcissism, shaping the way a person learns to see themselves and others. The family patterns that reinforce these tendencies, influencing how they understand love, validation, and their own self-worth. The social factors that further strengthen these traits, encouraging certain behaviors while discouraging others. And beyond that, we'll even take a closer look at how modern culture might be making things worse, sometimes in ways we don't even realize. Society plays a bigger role in this than we often think, subtly reinforcing behaviors that can contribute to narcissistic traits over time. Before we go any further, though, here's an important note. The purpose of this video is to help us better understand narcissism, not to diagnose anyone. Narcissistic traits exist on a spectrum, and only a qualified mental health professional can accurately assess whether someone has narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, or is simply displaying some narcissistic tendencies. If you're concerned about yourself or someone in your life, it's always a good idea to seek guidance from a licensed therapist or psychologist who can provide expert insight and support. With that said, let's start by exploring one of the most surprising and often misunderstood pieces of the puzzle: the early childhood years. This is where it all begins, and what happens during this critical stage can set the entire pattern in motion for years to come. Understanding these early influences is key to making sense of how narcissism develops in the first place. The early years, where it all begins. Let's clear up one of the biggest misconceptions right away. Narcissists aren't simply the result of being spoiled too much as children. The truth is far more complex, and in many cases, deeply painful. Imagine a young child just beginning to walk. They take a few wobbly steps, stumble, and fall. In that moment, they instinctively turn to their parent or caregiver, looking for reassurance. It might seem like a small, everyday event, but this moment is actually critical to how they develop emotionally. In a nurturing environment, when a child falls, they learn two fundamental lessons. 1. It's completely okay to fail or make mistakes. 2. Their worth isn't tied to their success. They are loved no matter what. These early moments lay the groundwork for a stable and secure sense of self. They teach children that failure isn't something to be feared, and that love isn't something that has to be earned. But for future narcissists, something in this process often goes wrong. Instead of receiving consistent reassurance, they may grow up in an environment where love feels conditional, dependent on performance, achievements, or meeting unrealistic expectations. Over time, this distorts their understanding of self-worth, shaping the way they navigate relationships, setbacks, and even their own emotions. This early stage is where the seeds of narcissism are planted, long before the more obvious traits begin to emerge. And what happens next in their development only reinforces these patterns further. Here's what typically happens instead. Some children grow up receiving endless praise, but not for their efforts, resilience, or personal growth. Instead, they are told they are exceptional, superior, or perfect, often in a way that makes them feel like their worth is tied solely to these qualities. Others experience the opposite: relentless criticism, unpredictable affection, or inconsistent love that makes them constantly question where they stand. One moment, they might be the golden child. The next, they're ignored or punished, leaving them in a constant state of emotional uncertainty. In both cases, the child absorbs a dangerous lesson. Love and acceptance are not freely given, they must be earned. Instead of developing a secure sense of self, They begin to equate their worth with external validation, achievements, or the approval of others. Attachment styles. The emotional blueprint. Think of attachment styles as an emotional blueprint for how we relate to others. They shape the way we connect, trust, and seek comfort in relationships. When a child develops a secure attachment, they learn that love is stable and unconditional. They grow up feeling safe in relationships, knowing that they are valued for who they are, not just what they accomplish. But when a child forms an insecure attachment, the opposite happens. They never fully learn to trust that love is constant, leading them to develop exhausting and contradictory patterns. They may spend their lives desperately seeking validation while simultaneously fearing intimacy and pushing people away. Now here's where things take an unexpected turn. Many people assume that narcissists have too much self-esteem. At first glance, they may appear confident, self-assured, even untouchable. But beneath that carefully constructed exterior, the reality is often far more complicated. In reality, they often have what psychologists call fragile self-esteem. Think of it like a grand, towering mansion built on an unstable foundation. From the outside, it appears solid, impressive, even unshakable. But underneath, the ground is shifting, full of cracks that threaten to bring the whole structure down. No matter how magnificent it looks, the truth is, it's never truly secure. And this is exactly where the infamous narcissistic cycle begins. 1. A deep, unstable sense of self-worth leads to an insatiable need to feel special. They crave admiration, achievements, and superiority, not just as a preference, but as a psychological necessity. 2. But because their self-worth isn't internally anchored, external validation never fully satisfies them. No matter how much praise, success, or attention they receive, it never fills the void inside. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much is poured in, it all leaks out, leaving them in a constant, exhausting pursuit of more. The protective shell. Why narcissists act the way they do. Most people see narcissistic behavior, the boasting, the constant need for attention, the obsession with status, and assume it all comes from arrogance. They believe narcissists truly think they're better than everyone else, completely detached from self-doubt. But in reality, what people are witnessing isn't raw confidence, it's armor. Imagine a medieval knight walking into battle. He isn't covered in heavy metal armor because he's invincible. He wears it precisely because he isn't. That armor exists to protect him from attacks, to shield his vulnerabilities from the outside world. Narcissistic grandiosity serves the same purpose. It's not an indication of excessive self-love or genuine superiority. It's a carefully constructed defense mechanism built to guard against deep, hidden insecurities. The louder they are, the less they have to confront the painful truth. Underneath it all, they don't feel secure, worthy, or whole. Early in life, when children face criticism, rejection, or unpredictable love, their brains adapt by developing coping mechanisms to protect themselves. Some children retreat inward, becoming quiet observers who avoid drawing attention to their flaws. Others turn into people pleasers, learning that the best way to receive affection is to meet everyone else's expectations, even at the cost of their own needs. Future narcissists, however, take a different route. Rather than withdrawing or endlessly accommodating others, they build something psychologists call the false self, an elaborate, carefully curated identity that appears confident, strong, and untouchable. This version of themselves isn't just for show. It's a survival strategy. Beneath the surface, however, remains a fragile, insecure core, hidden even from themselves. The environmental factors, that shape narcissism. Think of a child's environment like a greenhouse. The right combination of sunlight, water, and nutrients helps plants grow strong and resilient. But if the conditions are off, too much heat, inconsistent watering, poor soil, the plant can develop in strange, unhealthy ways. The same thing happens with emotional development. Here's how certain environmental conditions can distort a child's sense of self. Overvaluation. Instead of being loved for who they are, some children are taught that they are special, superior, and destined for greatness. This kind of conditional admiration feels intoxicating, but it's also fragile, because their worth is tied to external validation, not inner stability. Inconsistent parenting. One day, a parent is warm and affectionate. The next, they're distant or hypercritical. This unpredictability teaches a child that love isn't a steady presence. It must be earned, chased, or controlled. They learn to shapeshift, presenting whatever version of themselves will get them the most approval in the moment. Modern culture, social media, celebrity worship, and society's obsession with success create enormous pressure to be extraordinary. In a world where attention equals worth, being just okay feels like failure. Kids absorb this message early, believing that ordinary life is not enough, that they must stand out, go viral, or be remarkable to matter. Over time, these influences send a clear message. Who you truly are isn't enough. To survive, they create an identity that's larger than life, hoping it will shield them from the deep fear that, underneath it all, they are nothing special. And here's something many people don't realize. Narcissism isn't just shaped by extreme praise or harsh criticism. Even something as seemingly small as emotional neglect can play a major role. Think about a child who falls and starts crying. If their parent rushes over, soothes them, and acknowledges their feelings, the child learns that their emotions are valid. But if they're met with dismissive phrases like, "Stop crying," "You're fine," or "Toughen up," they start to internalize a different message. My feelings don't matter. Over time, children who experience this kind of emotional neglect adapt by disconnecting from their genuine emotions. They suppress vulnerability because they've learned it won't be met with support. Instead, they construct a stronger, more resilient version of themselves. One that appears confident, unshakable, and completely in control. But beneath that carefully crafted exterior, the emotional wounds remain. The biological component. Is narcissism genetic? You might be wondering, isn't narcissism purely the result of upbringing? It's easy to assume that family dynamics and early experiences are the sole cause, but that's only part of the picture. Surprisingly, genetics can also play a role in shaping narcissistic traits. Studies suggest that narcissistic tendencies can run in families, meaning certain genetic factors may increase the likelihood of developing these traits. But before you start worrying about your family tree, it's important to understand what this actually means. Having a genetic predisposition to narcissism doesn't guarantee that someone will become a narcissist. Think of it like having the ingredients for a cake. You still need the right conditions to bake it. Without the right mix of environmental influences, those genetic traits might never fully develop. Brain imaging research has revealed some fascinating insights about how narcissism is linked to brain structure. People with strong narcissistic traits often show differences in key areas of the brain, including the amygdala. This is the brain's emotional control center. It plays a crucial role in processing emotions like fear, anxiety, and pleasure. In some narcissists, this area may be hyperactive, making them more sensitive to perceived threats or criticism. The anterior cingulate cortex. This region helps regulate emotions and plays a role in decision-making and impulse control. Differences in this part of the brain may explain why some narcissists struggle with emotional regulation and react intensely to perceived slights. Beyond brain structure, temperament also plays a significant role. Some people are naturally more sensitive to rejection, while others have an innate drive to seek attention and admiration. When these biological traits combine with certain environmental factors, like unstable parenting or societal pressures, it creates the perfect storm for narcissism to take root. The modern world, a narcissism factory. We're now living in a time that almost seems designed to nurture and amplify narcissistic traits. Think about it for a second. Social media. It's become a constant cycle of seeking validation. Every post we make is a tiny plea for attention, and every like we receive is a brief hit of dopamine, making us crave even more. It's a never-ending loop of searching for approval, but it's rarely ever enough to feel truly satisfied. Cultural shifts. Society used to value the concept of doing your best, but now it's all about being the best. Everyone is expected to stand out, to be exceptional, to be noticed. Mediocrity is no longer an option in many social circles, especially with the pressure to be extraordinary. Dating apps. In the world of online dating, relationships have become a kind of marketplace. People are constantly trying to sell their best version of themselves, showcasing their most polished, attractive qualities. It's less about genuine connection and more about curating an image that others will find appealing. The result of all these factors. Research shows a clear upward trend in narcissistic traits across generations. The environment we live in today, filled with constant comparison, instant gratification, and an endless pursuit of admiration, is one that cultivates narcissism in ways that previous generations may not have experienced. But the good news is that awareness is the first crucial step toward change. When we can identify these patterns, we're better equipped to break free from them. Final takeaways. Narcissism isn't just about being spoiled or selfish. It's a far more complex and multifaceted phenomenon. It's not simply a matter of someone being conceited or overly confident. Instead, it involves a web of interconnected factors that contribute to the development of these traits, including childhood experiences that shape how we see ourselves and the world around us, protective mechanisms that are formed as a defense against vulnerability, biological factors that might influence our predisposition to certain behaviors, cultural influences that encourage the pursuit of admiration and status over genuine connection. Understanding narcissism requires us to take a deeper look at the whole picture. It's not about excusing harmful behaviors or justifying actions that hurt others. It's about recognizing the intricate forces at play that influence these patterns and how they shape individuals in ways we might not fully realize. If you or someone you know is struggling with narcissistic traits or behaviors, remember that help is available. Therapy and support are essential tools for navigating these complexities and finding healthier ways of relating to ourselves and others. And if you found this deep dive into narcissism intriguing, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on more psychological explorations in the future. Now, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What aspect of narcissism surprised you the most? What new insights did you gain from this discussion? Share your thoughts with me in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, remember, knowledge is the key to understanding, and understanding is the first step toward finding better ways to help ourselves and others on this journey.